The crash of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, the Andes survivors. The departure. On October 12, 1972, a chartered Uruguayan Air Force Fairchild FH-27D aircraft carried 45 people from Montevideo, Uruguay, to Santiago, Chile. The passengers were mostly members and supporters of the Old Christians club rugby team, along with some family and friends. They were heading to a friendly match. The crash. Due to poor weather over the Andes, the plane landed in Mendoza, Argentina, for an overnight stop. It resumed its flight the next day, October 13th. The pilot, assuming they had passed the Curico Pass into Chile, began his descent too early. The plane slammed into an unnamed mountain later called Glacier of Tears or Sorrow in the remote Argentine Andes. Shearing off both wings and the tail section, the fuselage slid down a steep slope before coming to rest in a snowy valley at an altitude of approximately 11,500 feet 3,500 meters. Of the 45 people, 12 died immediately or within the first day. 5 more died the next morning. The survivors were trapped in a freezing, barren landscape with little food, no heat source, and devastating injuries. The ordeal in the mountains. Initial hope and tragedy. The survivors had a small transistor radio and heard that the search for them had been called off after 8 days. This was a crushing psychological blow. They realized they were completely on their own. An avalanche on the night of October 29th buried the fuselage, killing 8 more people and trapping others for 3 days. This further reduced their numbers. The impossible decision. With only minuscule rations, some chocolate, snacks, and wine they found in the luggage long gone, starvation became imminent. Faced with death, they made the agonizing collective decision to eat the flesh of the deceased to survive. This act was framed by many of the survivors, deeply religious Catholics, as a form of Holy Communion, accepting the sacrifice of their friends so that others might live. This remains the most controversial and discussed aspect of their story. The expedition for help. By early December, after 2 months, it was clear no rescue was coming. Survivors noticed in the valley's geography that the West Chile was not the endless mountain chain they feared. On December 12th, 3 of the fittest survivors, Roberto Canessa, Nando Parado, and Antonio Tintin Vizintin, volunteered to climb out and seek help. Parado, who had lost his mother and sister in the crash, became the driving force. After a brutal climb, they realized Vizintin's extra rations were not sustainable. He returned to the crash site, and Canessa and Parado pressed on alone. For 10 days, they trekked across 44 miles, 70 kilometers, of punishing mountain terrain with no real mountaineering gear, surviving on snow and the small pieces of human flesh they carried as food. Finally, on December 20th, they descended into a greener valley and found a Chilean arriero cattle herder, Sergio Catalan, on the opposite bank of a river. He couldn't hear them, but Parado threw a note and a rock across the water. The note read, "I come from a plane that fell in the mountains. I am Uruguayan... The rescue. Catalan rode to the nearest town and alerted authorities. On December 22nd and 23rd, 1972, after 72 days in the Andes, the remaining 14 survivors at the crash site were located and rescued by Chilean Air Force and Army helicopters. The world was stunned that anyone had lived. Aftermath and legacy. Final toll of the 45 people on board. 29 died, some in the crash, others from injuries, cold, and the avalanche. 16 survived the 72-day ordeal. Public reaction. Initially, the revelation of cannibalism caused shock and outrage. However, as the full story of their suffering, faith, and the impossible ethical choice emerged, public opinion shifted to one of overwhelming sympathy and admiration for their will to live. Alive. The 1974 book, Alive, The Story of the Andes Survivors by Piers Paul Reed, became an international bestseller. A 1993 film adaptation, Alive, further popularized the story. Reunions and meaning. The survivors have remained a close-knit group, holding regular reunions. They have spoken widely about the lessons of cooperation, faith, and the limits of the human spirit. Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, in particular, became motivational speakers and authors. In summary, the story is not just one of a tragic crash, but an epic tale of survival against impossible odds. a profound ethical dilemma, and an incredible journey across the mountains that ultimately saved their lives. It is a testament to the extremes of human endurance, both physical and psychological. Other notable Argentine crashes include Lopa Flight 3140 to 1999, crashed on takeoff from Aeropark Jorge Newbery in Buenos Aires, killing 65. Austral Flight 2553 1997, crashed in Fray Bentos, Uruguay, killing 74.